Welcome to Week 1 of the module Language and Concept Development Across the Day, the Big Picture. The guiding question for this week is, how do I distinguish the key concepts of instruction from the language used to communicate about them? 3 big ideas guide this week's work. The first is that language and concept development go hand in hand across the school day. The second is that every teacher can and should take this into account in their planning and instruction. In schools where multilingual learners excel, all teachers see themselves as collaborative participants in the learning process, and every adult is viewed as a language teacher. The third big idea of this module is that by recognizing and focusing in on different aspects of academic activity at different moments, teachers can better plan for supporting both language and concept development for all students. This visual represents the idea that our brains are conceptual reservoirs that can be added to and accessed through any language we know or learn. The blue water in this visual represents concepts and knowledge. The arrows that are labeled L1 for first language and L2 for second language represent the pathways for acquiring and expressing that knowledge. All learning depends on some form of language or symbolic communication. The pathways going into the reservoir are how we receive information, by listening, reading, observing, questioning, interacting, and practicing. The arrows coming out are the ways we demonstrate what we know and communicate with others. This includes speaking, writing, artistic expression, and physical movement. Building on the distinction between the reservoir and the pathways, it is helpful to think of all academic activity as having different aspects. They are the conceptual knowledge itself, what students must learn, the ways students and teachers speak and listen, and the text materials that will be used and produced by reading and writing. For example, in any given content lesson, students will need to listen to and follow oral and written directions, read something from the board, a textbook, or a screen, demonstrate their learning and explain their reasoning out loud or in writing. This is true in every setting, including music, art, PE, and even in the cafeteria, where students have to know the rules for lining up, for paying, for cleaning up, and getting released. These rules may be posted on the walls and reinforced orally by teachers and staff. In multilingual settings, it is important to scaffold instruction to make the key concepts accessible to all students. This is often called sheltering the instruction, a term you are likely familiar with. Sheltering or scaffolding instruction means doing whatever is necessary to make the key concepts accessible and comprehensible. Sheltering can also be thought of as making intentional connections among the different dimensions of academic activity, the conceptual understandings or content of the curriculum, oral communication or how we talk about the concepts, interaction with text, how ideas are represented in print, what students read and write. This is best accomplished through use of visual images, movement, modeling, and demonstration. In addition, it means you need to uncover the language demand of your instruction and provide students opportunities to develop the needed language about the key concepts at their level of language proficiency. To capture the interconnection between language and content, think of using a zoom lens on a camera. You are taking pictures of a person in the mountains. At one moment, you zoom the lens in on the person smiling in the foreground, with the mountains providing a beautiful backdrop. You then zoom out to focus on the mountain peaks, but the person remains in the picture, providing perspective and scale. This same idea applies to teaching in multilingual settings. Both language demand and content concepts should always be in the picture, but the emphasis of a particular lesson shifts. Success in one aspect is integral to success in the other. Here is an example from one teacher's unit on the difference between solutions and mixtures. The first lesson is mainly on the content, with language as a significant part of the background. The teacher first talks aloud about the different properties of mixtures and solutions. She then conducts a demonstration to provide a visual scaffold for the properties of solutions and mixtures, and models for students how they might think about what they will do. Then in small groups, the students conduct the experiment with one another and observe the properties for themselves, noticing and documenting what happened and how the solutions and mixtures looked similar to or different from one another. In a language-focused lesson, with the science experiment as the background, the teacher works with a small group of bilingual learners. They practice with one another using the language of compare and contrast to explain what they observed in detail, retell the steps they went through, and the observations they made, and practice asking one another questions and refining the accuracy of their language. There are two main takeaways from this presentation. The first is that academic work includes the concepts being taught and the language used to teach and learn about those concepts. Very often we plan for the concepts without giving much thought to the language demands of our activities. The second important takeaway is that language demand and language development always have to be accounted for in the planning process, using your zoom lens to move back and forth between the two.